All right, we got the crew together. How's it going? I think this is episode 89 of PHP Roundtable. It's been a couple days since we all got together and recorded, like about 365 of them, maybe. Not really sure.
Who's counting?
So this is going to be a little bit of a different format than what we've traditionally have done, or we've talked about doing things a little differently. We're all really busy, me amongst those people, and so trying to coordinate when we're going to get together and actually have a roundtable, and then coordinate guests to join us and try to figure out a day that worked for everybody and a time that worked for everybody. Just got to be like more in the way than anything else. So at Tech this year, actually a little bit before Tech, we started talking about what we could do to kind of bring PHP Roundtable back, because I, for one, love Roundtable, and I've heard from others like, when are you going to do Roundtable again? So we kind of thought through it a little bit through Tech and decided, okay, listen, let's just decide on a day and time every month to record, and the panel will be the panel, and the panel will show up, and if we have a guest who can join us and pop in there and talk about something, then we'll do that, but we'll have an established day and time. So as of this recording, the second Friday of every month at 3:00 Pacific time, you guys can do the translation wherever you are, we all kind of agreed we would set time aside to get together and jump in. So there are no guests today. TJ is here. He has agreed to be part of our regular panel. Ramsey is not, but that's he had a conflicting engagement for today, and that's fine. That's how it's going to be, right? If you can make it, you can make it. If you can't, you can't. So yeah, that's where everything is. So let's go ahead and go around. Let's catch everybody up. If this is your first time watching the PHP Roundtable, we'll just kind of reintroduce everybody. So I'm Eric. I'm one of the people behind PHP Architect. I'm also one of the people behind PHP Tech, the conference that we just had a couple weeks ago. So there's that. Sarah, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, first, Eric, before I do that, I want to just thank you for that great introduction and great commitment to going forward, and pretend like you are not actually the one throwing us under the bus about the scheduling conflicts. But hello, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am one of the people who works on PHP sometimes, not as often as others. But yeah, I looking forward to talking about whatever we're talking about today.
Joe?
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe. I have been working with PHP for nearly 20 years, off and on professionally. Currently doing a lot of DevOps and Python work, but still mostly PHP on the side projects and consulting work.
All right. And TJ?
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, I'm TJ. I've been working with PHP also for about 20 years. I've been working with Laravel for about 10 years now too. Yeah, I work with PHP like day in and day out, and my main focus right now is on generative AI and bringing that to Laravel via Sparkle.
And that's exciting, and we'll probably talk about that some more. So it's funny, and even TJ noticed it because he mentioned it. TJ used to be like the API guy, like anything API related, TJ knew. Then he just got tired of the P and just went with straight AI now. He's my go-to person for AI, it turns out.
Yeah,
I
you
know
know,
he,
I have a pattern of doing that. My legal name is Thomas, and over the course of years, I went from Thomas to Tommy to Tom to TJ. So I've just got this like lifelong thing of just trimming letters off of
you
stuff.
just get rid of the useless letters, and
Yeah,
you get there eventually.
Yeah, no, it was natural to go from API to AI. Eventually, you're just going to pee yourself out.
there you go. That's right.
Okay, so no real
Eyebrow.
topic for today's podcast. We have been talking in Discord a little bit about things to discuss. So we'll just kind of start going down that path. I had brought up to Sarah see if she had any thoughts or opinions on the jiblib JLibC vulnerability in the icon v uh, function that I guess is going to be impacting PHP, and in having that conversation, because the exploit for this, it was supposed to be demonstrated at a conference or a meetup or something, and I went back to do my research, and that is actually supposed to be happening today. So however this exploit is supposed to get triggered through PHP, it's being demonstrated either today or tomorrow. So I'm anticipating more information coming out about this. But Sarah, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you asked me about this like right before the show, and I was like, "What glibc vulnerability? Oh, this is news to me." Because unfortunately, I have not been following statements either from the project or activity on the list as much, but I looked into it. And my sort of quick hot take is okay, just because you're running PHP on an older version of glibc doesn't necessarily mean you're immediately vulnerable to remote code execution. So that's the good side. The bad side is there's still a decent chance. So you should definitely upgrade your underlying libraries and upgrade your PHP as well. The sort of long and short of it is for one particular character set being converted to other character sets. I think UTF-8 is probably the go-to that anyone's going to be doing because they're processing into UTF-8 on the way in, then from UTF-8 on the way out. There is a non-zero possibility that somebody could craft a malicious bit of data that when it gets converted, the buffer gets lost. And this is probably like a multi-byte handling. This is going to be at least a 2-byte encoding. So it probably stops halfway through a character. And because of what's in the first character, it instructs it to look past the end of the string. And the next thing you know, you're off in unallocated memory territory, which depending on allocator models, you might end up in a space where the CPU just says, that's not your memory. I'm canceling you right now. But because of how PHP is actually set up, it is. So I'm getting distracted by the talk happening in chat. Because of
Sorry.
how PHP is actually set up, 2 blocks of memory next to each other are actually all owned by PHP. They're slab allocated. So it is less likely to be caught by process protection, but it's also more likely to be difficult to predict what's going to be next to the data because of everything else that's happening in process. So we're going to try and get Derek in here because he probably knows more about this. He's a little more active with the current branches right now. And in the meantime, just upgrade your stuff, man. dpackage update or apt-get update, apt-get dist upgrade. How do you administrate Linux? I don't know. I have people for that.
This sounds right up Joe's territory right here.
That is my specialty and among my particular set of skills. First off, you shouldn't be vulnerable by this because like we've said before, you've updated glibc. This hasn't been a PHP thing necessarily. That's why PHP made a statement on it. Is you don't necessarily have to go update PHP to fix this. It's much more you should go update glibc. So for me, my systems, I back them all with Ansible, which is in a very opinionated provisioning system setup. So I just install security updates as they come in. I update routinely, like once a week on all my systems, and all that stuff is just in the background. I don't have to think about it. So for me, it's not a big deal. Now, if you are managing older systems, if you have a Ubuntu 14.04 machine hanging out, you might want to go poke at that machine and just make sure that you've got hopefully some extended maintenance or some extended security policies going there that are going to help you stay secure just from all of the other things that are probably vulnerable on that machine. So yeah, from that standpoint, your ops team is probably unfazed by this because glibc seems to be one of those things that is kind of hard to fall behind unless you just stop applying updates in general. So of course, if you just stop and you just don't do any updates, yeah, you're of course not going to get it. But if you're just doing regular apt updates or DNF updates or even yum updates, you should be getting this.
Yeah, +1 for Ansible and nightly container builds. I think my Monday morning patch job routine saved me again, I guess. Like I think I got fallen into the routine of like every Monday morning, I update my laptop, restart that, then I go around and do whatever like servers, and then I have like auto deployments for like nightly builds and updates of all my containerized stuff. So yeah, just try to automate that and get into a routine of it.
Yeah, a friend of mine likes to say you aren't what you don't automate. So you ultimately end up doing all of these manual things. And my choice of Ansible has just kind of helped me throughout my career. I mean, I started Ansible in the early days and it was just a super easy way to manage servers. If you're not familiar with Ansible, it's mostly Python under the hood, which isn't scary. It looks a little weird to PHP developers, but it's not scary. And then once you get really comfortable with Ansible, you can roll that into a open source project called AWX, which is essentially command and control for Ansible. It's Red Hat's Tower product is based on top of AWX, and their Ansible automation platform is Ansible's Tower built on top of Ansible playbooks, and it is a fantastic thing that you don't necessarily have to go buy Red Hat for. If you're at scale, go buy Red Hat. You don't want to roll this drone at scale. If you're not at like scale, if you just want to tinker around with this, you can go find Ansible tutorials. Jeff Gerling, who is a fantastic resource from the PHP community, wrote a great book on Ansible that you can find online. That was really grateful really great for me when I was getting started and really kind of scaling up what I was doing with Ansible.
That kind of reminds me, TJ, or anybody out there, but TJ specifically, because he's the first person that turned me on to it. When we were talking about having you speak at Tech this year, and we're trying to come up with ideas, you really need to write a talk on PHP developers using Makefiles, because I remember you introduced me to Makefiles, and I'm like, wow, I knew what they were, but I never thought to use them the way you had suggested. I'm like, I don't think a lot of people know about this.
That was such a fantastic talk too, Joe. Like I really enjoyed sitting in on that.
I was about to give Eric some crap about not coming to my talk on Tech, because that's what I actually talked about for GitHub Actions is essentially just using Make.
Oh, really?
That stuff, yeah. My hot take on fixing everybody's CI/CD is to wrap everything in Make commands. That way, you can run it locally on your machine, and it's going to do essentially the same thing in CI/CD.
Right.
Hey, don't feel bad. Eric missed my talk too, but
well, I missed yours intentionally. No.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He was a little busy. I'll give him that.
So, and it's weird. It's just one of those tools that I had completely forgotten about. Like I had gotten so into all these other tools and scripting and all this other stuff, I had completely forgotten about Makefiles. And TJ happened to mention this was years ago now. TJ had mentioned it to me. I'm like, wait, I don't think you're using Make correctly. And he shows it to me. I'm like, I take it back. I was not using Make correctly. Hey, we got Derek.
Yeah, I've moved on to task files. They're awesome. They're very powerful, and I think they pair well. Like task files, I think pair well with Ansible. It's all YAML and real nice. So I've
Are
been
you
kind of
saying
pairing those two
what are you
together.
saying? Tax or tack?
Task. So TASK task
Oh,
files.
task files.
Yep, it's like taskfile.dev or I think that's or task.dev, one of the two. Taskfile.dev.
I'll have to check this out. So we got Derek. Let's circle back around to where he screwed up in his PHP development.
Yeah, this was definitely Derek's fault.
This is all Derek's fault. We're all open to security flaws because of Derek. No. Hey,
Yeah.
Derek. Hi.
24 years ago, that's where it went wrong.
I was
Hey,
right about when you invited me to the PHP project. So yes, yeah.
That tracks.
I think I did do that, didn't I?
Yeah.
So if you're listening to the audio stream, Derek did post that you actually don't need to worry about updating PHP, although you should always keep your PHP up to date. But you don't have to worry so much for the vulnerability we were just talking about. What was it called? The icon V.
Icon V.
Prob-
Yes.
It'd probably come up with some funny name like Heartbeat or whatever it is.
Yeah. So this is from the
it's
glibc library. Yeah.
It's no longer vulnerability if it doesn't have a snazzy name, right?
That's right. Well, you need the marketing behind it, right? I mean, that's
You don't have to
very
update
important.
it if it doesn't have its own ad campaign. That's what I'm getting out of this.
Yes, exactly.
So, do you know anything more about this? Like I said, I mentioned that
No.
the demonstration was supposed to happen either today or tomorrow, and I have not heard anything else. Like I'm still not even sure how it's exploited. I've heard rumors of manipulating headers, but I don't know for sure how it's
Yeah.
exploited.
So from what I know, it's only really doing if you're accepting something from this very specific character set, and I'm pretty sure some applications will take a character set from HTTP headers, but this isn't the particular one that is used a lot anyway. So I don't think there's a big thing there, because mostly when you deal with incoming data, you're supposed to validate it anyway, right? Or at least you whitelist the character sets that you're accepting,
Mhm.
and it isn't a very particularly much use one here. Or I say here, I mean, it's not. It's a, from what I understand, it's a Chinese character set that also hasn't been used there very much anymore either lately. So I
Well,
think
the character set name has 2022 in it. Is that a year? Like
no, I think it's just like ISO 8601, and that is not
then.
from the
Okay.
year 8601 either.
Thank you, Derek. I would
Well,
not have figured that one out.
So the only thing that, and I'm sure these write-ups are meant to be a little alarming, but
Yeah.
it does specifically call out Drupal, Magento, Symfony, or Laravel as areas where this exploit could be executed on. But it doesn't sound like maybe. I mean, maybe theoretically it could be, but like a default install, probably not.
I don't know. I know as much as you about this because that's the only thing I've seen.
Well, this statement right here is part of his bio. I think this is talking about other exploits or other vulnerabilities.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah. You're right. I am glad you saw that. Okay.
One of us has to read, man.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Especially when
all
it's
those
better.
letters and everything. Okay, good. I feel better about that. All right, cool. All right. And then cool.
But yeah, at least updating wise, you don't really need to update PHP at all.
Okay.
That's the handy.
But still update PHP.
Yes, still do it, but not for this specific reason. Yeah.
So since we have two of the internals people here, how are things at the foundation? How has that? I mean, I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot here, but like with the foundation and the workflow with internals, which, to be clear, or correct me if I'm wrong, I want to make sure everybody understands that the foundation is not PHP internals. Like these are two separate things. A foundation is an organization that will help finance developers who are working on internals, but they are not one of the same. They're two different entities.
That's right.
With the establishment of PHP Foundation, have either one of you really noticed any difference with how internals is working? Do you feel like things are going better? Or do you think that developers are able to contribute, focus more on efforts with internals?
We're both
Okay.
waiting for the other to answer.
Yeah.
If it's a touch, I'm not trying to put anybody on
I
the
have
spot. I'm
opinions.
just,
I have
I'm
many-
just curious. Like, as a person on the outside who doesn't even participate with internals, like, we do contribute. So for transparency, PHP Architect does contribute to the foundation. So we are contributing money to the foundation, but I don't really understand. Like, I'm like kind of out here saying, okay, things are better, things are not better. What's happening? Like,
Eric, has PHP Architect demanded that people receiving foundation grants vote certain ways on RFCs?
damn, I knew I should have included something in that. Yeah.
I'm not sure whether you're
the answer is
contributing
no.
enough, to be honest.
Well, that too, yeah.
I would say yes in different ways though. There's now a bunch of people that work on it full time. I think we have Ilya and Gina working full time now, and they will be able to crank out lots of stuff, just like Nikita used to do. I would say that probably in the last 2 years, because none of us were really full time. There's a little bit of slack in it, but on the other side, the things that you probably don't see much is that there's also in the background we are actually quite getting the processes done better. Like the whole way how we do a release process is always kind of shadily written down, like not really complicated, and so we're working on that kind of thing.
Especially how you nominated the people to do release managers is always pretty crappy, I thought.
You didn't bribe us enough is the problem.
I mean, that was probably not the most controversial bit of it, but there's other things like until when do you do security releases? Like not a lot of thought was put in there for quite some time, right? So now we have at least I spent some time on that, on getting that sorted. Also, nobody did maintenance on any of the servers for ages, like decades probably. So now, because I get to spend some time on that, we can improve on that and we can modernize that to make it a lot easier to maintain, and also to make sure that our servers are also not running Debian from 2017.
What was that about making sure your glibc is updated?
It's all updated now.
Well, now, yes.
Except for, I don't think I have access to the pair machine, so I can't fix that.
Pair, holy smokes!
That's run off of what's his name's in Germany, right?
Derek, yeah.
Sorry,
Derek's not in Germany.
Oh, you're not in Germany?
His monarch is German.
No.
You don't seem sure.
Oh no, right. Sorry, that's by marriage. Never mind. Yes. I got so used to joking about the Queen being German. I just
to be fair, the Dutch king's father is also German, so it's still the same thing, isn't it? It's all the same family. What am I saying? It's literally all the same family.
You're not American. That's all we know.
Hey, no. This is Roundtable International now. We gotta broaden our audience.
Yeah. So I got a question. As people who work heavily in open source, especially you internal people, TJ, I know you've done some open source stuff. Joe,
Joe open sources mental illness.
Yeah, that's how hardcore he is with open source. What does how much of a problem do you think it is finding these very obscure? Again, this exploit we've been talking about has been an exploit for 20 years in these dependencies, these like very far removed from whatever you're working on, but you use something that uses something that is dependent on a package that gets this exploit. Like, how do you keep track of that stuff? How do you just kind of out there watching the security boards and seeing, who's up for the latest?
Really goddamn difficultly is the answer.
Yeah.
Because we all saw this recently with the XZ exploit. The comic that went around was that XKCD cartoon of a tower of bricks, and down at the bottom, holding everything up, as a tiny little library maintained by some random dude in Nebraska for no compensation. Like, nobody can dig all the way down in their dependency stack. It's not a realistic thing.
Right.
The best we can do is to say, like, okay, my immediate dependencies, like, I'm going to keep an eye on them and watch for their vulnerability announcements and things like that. Maybe I'm even going to look through their code base and see how they're actually implementing the things that they do. But you kind of have to stop at one degree and hope and trust that those projects are doing the same thing down to their dependencies. And the reality is, there's going to be problems in the code supply chain. It's almost inevitable, unfortunately.
There's tools that are helping, though, specifically tools around software bill of materials, or SBOM. That's a lot of what I do, is going through and looking through SBOM lists. There's ways to export this out of your different libraries, and essentially what this is, it is a full list of every one of your dependencies. If something you depend on needs some other package, it's in this list. If 4, 5, 10 dependencies down, there's a dependency there, it's in this list, because it goes into compliance. Specifically for SOC 2 compliance, it's one of the steps is you have to be able to show a complete bill of materials for all your software dependencies. And even as somebody who has to maintain that and tons of different repos, it's very hard to keep track of what those changes are doing. And from version to version, I go through a composer lock file. I go through the similar lock files in other languages, and that's me trying to be as diligent as I can, to where I'm looking for those attacks where somebody is looking for a typo package, or I'm trying to find those where those are trying to be slipped into our ecosystem or our systems. And those are the easy things to spot, because typically you're going to see that on a diff if you look hard enough. It's just having to look hard enough is very intensive, and it's very hard to automate that.
Well, and there are different vectors for these things too. There are the intentional poison pills, but there's also just the people write buggy code. We're not perfect.
Right.
And are you going to go and do a code review on every single dependency you have? You're not. There are third-party services who employ people whose sole job is to go look for these things. But they're still not going to be able to find everything. We have things like 24-year-old bugs in Icon V, for God's sake. But it's going to be one extra step. If you have the money to pay for that, well, maybe you're an open source project, you don't have the money to pay for that. So how do you find them then?
A great place to start too is GitHub and Dependabot. Like, I think that's a really easy thing to enable, and it helps you quite a bit keep things up to date. I have a pretty steady stream of like email feeds of like, hey, here's your Dependabot updates for today, and just goes through like all of my dependencies, things that updates. It'll like tell you about if there's like CVEs attached to them. It's a really strong tool.
Talking about CVEs, have you seen the amount of CVEs that come out of the Linux kernel at the moment? Because they're basically attaching a CVE to every single bug that they found.
Oh, really?
That's aggressive.
The latest release had like 150 of them or something silly like that.
But like, are they filing CVEs for things that are coming up with scores of like 1.3 or something?
Every single bug.
Oh, wow.
That's
okay,
a lot
but
of
at least
paperwork.
there is a standardized scoring system, and you can do something like don't give me anything.
Yeah, because
lower than a 4.
But not every bug's a security vulnerability.
Well, their argument is that because it's the Linux kernel, everything very much likely could be a security bug.
And it's honestly impossible to know sometimes.
That's true.
Well, there's that too. But talking about security reviews, like you were earlier, we actually, as part of the foundation, we actually in the process of getting an external audit of the more critical bits of PHP. going as well.
Yeah.
Done by an external organization, company. I don't know. It's basically sponsored by the German government, which is kind of interesting.
Really?
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, that way the government can help support or prove that they're
Yeah.
using secure software.
Well,
Yeah.
the government is like, particularly in Germany, I would imagine the government probably uses a few installations of PHP somewhere.
Well, it's not only
Well-
that, right? I mean, the whole European has like a resilience. I can't remember the name. It's too late to remember stuff, to be honest. But yeah, they have a whole resilience thing, and I know Sebastian has been speaking at the European Parliament or related organizations about supply chain attacks as well. So it's very much in the forefront of what they are doing, and there
I
will
know
likely be some legislation coming out of that as well.
An exercise exploit is not in anyone's best interest,
No,
but the
of course.
person doing the exercising the exploit.
I know it's a selfish statement because I've been a supporter of open source for so long, but I've always been surprised that more governments haven't taken more of an official role in open source. Like not
Yeah.
in a negative way, but like Derek was saying, where they're sponsoring projects and efforts to make sure open source solutions are good and secure, because that's the software. Not only is it the software people use, but this is the software that other software is built on.
And it's the
And-
software of the people and by the people.
Right. And I always felt like that governments, should come out with almost their own list of these are projects that we're monitoring, like we're helping monitor for security issues, for bug fixes and things. So it's good to hear that's happening.
So you know that recently PHP project has extended their security releases to 2 + 2 years instead of 2 + 1 year, right?
Mhm.
And that is likely going to have to be increased again, because there will be likely legislation in the European Union that demands, even for open source projects, for that to be all standardized in some way. It's quite an interesting thing.
Tell us what our minimums are, though.
Sure, they can. Talk to Roman about it if you catch him
I
somewhere.
need to have a talk with
Yeah,
somebody about
yeah.
this, because
Yeah.
like coming from my freedoms.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't they just like force Apple to use USB-C? I mean,
Apple is
Well,
doing
that's-
business. Apple is like collecting
That's
money
fair.
for people for their product. PHP is not doing that.
that's
Yeah,
totally
so
fair.
there are carve-outs for open source projects, but like there will be for like the large things likely minimum standard level or service levels still.
Setting
That's still
minimums on
acceptable.
sorry, I'm just going to go off a rant here, because setting a minimum
No,
on
I'm not
how much
disagreeing with you
support
there,
an
but
open source project has to provide is called slavery with extra steps, my friend.
well, that
Well,
was my
but,
comment
I mean,
when Roman.
They
was
could
my
position
comment
it.
to Roman.
They could position it as, "Hey, if you ever want us to use your open source project in..."
No, that's not
government.
what it is whatsoever. That's like
Oh no.
no.
Don't
But
use my open source project then. Bye.
this is my comment that I made to Roman about it. Said, well, who's going to pay for it?
Yes, exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
An extra year of security support for PHP.
If the European Union wants to become a sponsor of the PHP Foundation,
That's what I was
let's
angling
talk.
at. But to be fair, I mean, supporting PHP is security updates for another year. How much time will that take? Maybe 50
no.
hours
Yeah.
for a year.
Like,
So
we're not
it's
talking
that-
a
that
massive
hard.
investment of
No.
time. It's just the principle of it's just like, wait, whoa.
It's setting a precedent as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with Joe. Yeah, it's like you can't bully. You shouldn't be able to bully an open source project into doing something.
That's how you
Where's
get.
my
That's how
freedoms?
you get in and take open an open source project and then release malicious code.
Yeah. Well, and back on that a little bit, the XZ utility backdoor that was mentioned earlier. I don't remember if Derek or Sarah mentioned it, but one of the interesting things about that was a long con, right? That's where there was a lot of social engineering. If you're not familiar with it, the XZ utility is a utility that's in. I don't know if it's in all compression software like Zip and things like that, but
It's one type of
used a
compression.
lot. Yeah. And the con, I call it a con, but the long con on that was somebody had kind of wiggled theirself into through social engineering, becoming the maintainer of that project, and they were the bad actor who, over years, slowly introduced stuff. That was
hot take. I'm actually really impressed. Like
with the patience of that.
If
Oh, yeah.
that's what it takes for you to get me, congratulations.
Yeah,
Well done.
get me all day long. Got
Yeah,
me. Like
GG, well
that's
played.
that is incredible.
Yeah.
But that also convinces me it probably had a 3-letter agency behind it, because
Oh,
I don't
interesting
know
take.
anybody.
I would go with
for
a
the
one
lulz
character
has the time for
agency.
The-
I would go with a one character agency.
Well,
You'll have to
and
tell me what your theory is offline, because I'm
we,
curious
yeah,
to
I say I'm not looking for people in black choppers to land in my backyard here, but PHP actually, dodged something very similar with not so much a social engineering thing, but
Oh,
I mean,
no.
it was.
The thing
it
you're
was
about to
kind
talk about was clumsy as hell. That was an embarrassing attack.
Why did you? Okay, so what I'm talking about was somebody tried to impersonate a very high-level internals person and get a PR merged, right? That's what had happened.
Oh, the
No,
one
the
I'm thinking about is where something just got committed straight into our Git server, and seemed to
Yes,
bypass
yes. Yeah,
authentication.
you're right. You're right. It did get committed. I forgot about
I mean,
that.
they impersonated it to the extent that they put, I think, Nikki or Rasmus's name on the commit. But
Right, the
one of
commit.
that was the extent of it. But it was super obvious. It was like,
Yeah,
if
and it was
Git
called in like
variable
5
is
minutes.
set, eval the
Yeah.
Git variable.
Also,
Like, no
I still
subtlety
don't
at all.
I still don't understand how that happened.
Because we
How?
run our own Git server.
But nobody has access to the machine.
Well,
yeah,
be-
but
you don't
the
have
Git
to.
binary on there was probably so old. It probably had some known exploit. I mean,
that is possible.
update your software, kids.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
even to get access to the machine, that would not have been a simple thing to do, because
Yeah.
you'd have to go through a jump server somewhere in Germany and use two-factor authentication to get even access to the machine. So it isn't that simple to do.
Well, the
But
question is,
a bug in
did they
Git
have to
is
have file
possible.
system access for that, or was it straight through the Git protocol?
I don't know.
I thought it was straight through the Git protocol, and that is
That-
open and doesn't require the jump host.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't understand the full story. I thought somebody had merged the commit, but you're saying the commit got pushed into. Go ahead.
It wasn't a merge commit. It was just a
Okay.
straight commit.
All right. So having like a signed commit had made no difference in whatever exploit this was.
If
Well,
we
they could-
had an established process that everyone pushing to the repo has to sign their commits, or even enforce that at GitHub, if we were using GitHub, that the commit must be signed, that would have caught it for sure, because they wouldn't have been able to sign those commits.
Well, they
But
would have been
we
able to
have no
sign it.
history of that.
They could have signed it, but not with the same signature as the original.
Yes,
person's.
it wouldn't be a known signature.
Yes, you could still see it as it being a signed commit, right?
Is that a requirement today now? I mean, or do we?
No.
Any
I think we
thoughts
should.
on
It's
That's
why?
something that is supported by GitHub. GitHub does support requiring signed commits.
Not quite.
By-
Because
No?
you can also do it through your SSH key, so it doesn't really help a lot.
There's
You
also a
do-
known bug with GitHub in being able to fake a signed commit that they have come out and said,
What?
we're not going to fix this.
Yeah,
Oh my
it's not as simple. I mean,
It's,
it helps, but it isn't the
Yeah, it's one of those things where it is blatantly obvious when it happens, but the scenario for it to happen is one of those things where they're just like, yeah, we can't fix this. So that's where that is a contributing part to the conversation that I've heard where people are talking about, well, let's just stop signing Git commits. And I'm like, well, I see what you're saying, but let's not throw the bathwater out, right? With the baby, or the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
I mean, we can throw the bathwater out.
the bathwater goes out, not the baby. Sorry.
Please.
We're not like saving it in jars.
You can tell I have
Please,
kids, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, if I would set this up, I would require GPG signing for every commit, but you can't distinguish between the GitHub user interface doesn't allow you to require GPG or SSH. It's either both of them or neither of them.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you could do. Okay.
I thought that too, but nope.
All right.
You guys are bummers, man. I'm gonna stop having you all on Roundtable. You're bumming me out. Jeez, Joe, if you have a link to something,
There's some
about
good
that-
news as well, right? We got property hooks passed. That worked.
Anyone can commit to the repo, but at least we have property hooks.
Exactly.
All right. I'm fine talking about property hooks. I know. We talked about it on PHP Ugly, and I asked John to explain
Sorry,
why everybody was
thought-
so excited about this.
This isn't PHP Ugly?
No.
Why am I here? Oh, I'm kidding.
I mean, if you can explain the hype behind the property hooks, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I'm like, all right, I kind of see the benefit to it, but I didn't feel it was as earth shattering as it was kind of being marketed as. I mean, that might just be me being a dick, but I'm fine with that.
I think it was more because at the last moment there were a few quite vocal noises about it being the absolute worst thing in the world, and then it passed with 96% in favor.
I would say it passed pretty significantly.
Yeah.
All
Was
right.
that because people didn't want to vote no?
I
think
you're
that might
part of
have
the problem, and you're part of the problem.
I think that happens a lot with some of these contentious RFCs. Is people just don't want to vote no, and that's their right. Whatever.
That makes me sad though. I'd rather they vote their conscience, but
Absolutely, I would too.
So let me ask you this, since we're going down this path, and I'm feeling a little bad because TJ did have a topic he wanted to touch on.
I just needed that out there. No, this is interesting. Let's go.
So again, as an outsider who is greatly impacted with the decisions that are made through internals, is it possible to come up with an easier way for somebody like and I represent like a significant amount of PHP developers who use PHP. Easy way for us to look at these voting decisions and see why somebody might have voted, especially for the negative. Like, I'm always curious, the people who disagree with voting, especially when things are so lopsided and you have like one or two people voting no, why they make that decision. And just scrubbing through I'm on the internals mailing list, so I do get the emails to my email client, but without scrubbing through that or through externals, I just want to be able to look at the voting and see why people voted yes, why people voted no. And I know that's putting the burden on the people doing the voting, and you really don't want to add friction to that process. But can we come up with a solution for that?
Well, more than once I voted no on something, and I've written an email to the list that's in the thread to say, okay, here's why I'm voting no. And often it's, I don't really want to vote no, but like, I don't like this thing and I can see it's going to pass even with my no vote. So it's more, symbolic than anything. But I agree. This shouldn't have to be, oh, you were curious why they voted no? Now go dig through externals.io.
Two years of discussion threads.
It shouldn't be that.
I would probably say that the people that are quite involved with contributing in general, that actually reasonably often merge code, they will state why they vote no on the mailing list. The people that don't contribute a lot.
Yes, I'll agree with that. Yeah.
But it's still the mailing list. I mean, and I've seen that. I've seen exactly what Sarah said. Hey, I'm voting no on this because XYZ.
Yeah.
But like sometimes those threads are so long and they've gone on for so many, for months and weeks, months and years, that you're digging through, because especially if something goes through multiple rounds of voting, and it's like, oh, I'm going to vote no until this gets changed, and there's discussion about changing stuff, and then it gets changed, and
there's not multiple rounds of voting though. It's just one.
Well, some specific projects, I'm not going to say which ones, but they have gone through multiple rounds of voting. Where
I can't think of them.
Yeah. But
Well,
to me,
people
in a
have made
perfect
those
world-
comments before it actually gone up, had actually gone up for voting too, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, in a perfect world, what I'd like to see is just one extra field on that voting doodle where you can put
Yes.
either a short blurb or maybe a link to a message.
Yes.
And that's it.
yes, exactly.
The trouble with that is our
link to
voting
something.
system is some random like doodle plugin to some random wiki software that
Well, it's worse than that. I tried upgrading it yesterday or 2 days ago, and when I did it, is this a PG show?
No, you're fine. Don't worry.
it shat the bed.
Yeah, basically everything went to hell.
I guess the question is, could we move this to GitHub in some way? Does GitHub discussions have a voting interface, perhaps?
I have other opinions about that because
Okay.
I don't think we should outsource our what's the word? Bill of records to GitHub.
Well, it
to,
doesn't
a
have to be
to a
GitHub.
company in general, right?
I'm suggesting GitHub as just like
I
we already
mean,
have a lot of shit on GitHub.
Where would you record this? Right, that's the problem.
Well, that's what
I
I'm
mean,
asking. Like,
if you
is
do
it
the
supported by
voting
discussion?
if you do the voting through the doodle poll that we have, then where? I mean, you can modify.
Oh, yeah.
It needs to go somewhere.
Well,
You
it
need to
must have a
record it somewhere.
database behind it somewhere, even if it's just a file that has Y's
Oh,
and
you can-
N's in it.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a
Okay.
serialized PHP file.
Okay,
PHP
so can we add a field into that serialization that contains context?
Yeah, it is
And we can
possible to
limit
do.
that. You know, like we don't need
Yeah.
more than 200 characters for a
I was like,
mailing list URI.
If it's as
It's
long as
possible
a
to.
tweet, I'm sure people would be happy with it. You know.
Yeah, it requires modifying the doodle poll on DocuWiki, which is doable. Yeah.
But then that makes
mean,
upgrading harder because now you're modifying this plugin that.
Yeah, the plugin is still running from a version from 2016, and I tried upgrading it, and it didn't work because it had been heavily modified, and nobody told me about this.
Oh, it had already been modified.
Whoops.
Oh, that's
Yes,
fantastic.
because it had to be because it had to tie in with the PHP VCS user account system.
Oh, of course, yeah, that makes sense.
That's classic
And
legacy.
so
PHP.
that's after I then upgraded it because nobody told me about anything of this. Then of course that didn't work anymore, so I had to revert that.
But for
And then I
everybody watching
figured
right
out-
now, this is why we don't have better voting systems.
And then when I did that, I figured out that this log file is actually getting really big because it didn't think about any of the PHP 8.3 warnings and errors that we have. Like,
I'm
it's
sorry.
okay. I fixed
I'm
that
gonna
too
try
now.
not to laugh at that too much.
It's okay. So that's what PHP Foundation money also goes into, making sure the stuff continues ticking over.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a need or an opportunity to contribute some infrastructure playbooks to the PHP project, I would. I know a guy who might be interested. It's me.
Yeah, I actually been talking to somebody to help us out with this.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
Surprise, it's me.
He's not been talking to me about it. No.
It wasn't you in this case, but I'm happy to have a chat with you as well. I mean, the wiki is particularly pretty bad because it doesn't follow any of the other standards and any of the other services do. It's like backup is some random stuff, and the deployment is like git pull, which isn't particularly great either. And all the permissions are from some other random user. It's not www data and stuff like that. It's a terrible mess. I'm going to have to remove some
Guys,
access and
people
fix
are
this shit up.
listening, so don't freak too many people out.
No, it's fine. It's just a wiki. It's okay. At least it's got backed up. Most of the stuff wasn't backed up until I turned it on.
This is just like real world stuff, man. Like real world problems.
That's what I'm saying.
I've dealt with all this stuff before
Yeah.
too. Same problems, different places, for sure.
Well, it's
Oh,
like
I-
nobody's
we-
looked at it for 10 years, right?
We stumbled onto I'm not going to expose too much, but we stumbled onto a PHP 5 application very recently, and we're like, what?
Yep.
Why? What? And so now we realize.
What year is this?
Yeah.
Oh, you act as if 30% of PHP users aren't still running 5.6. Come on.
Is it really that high? You're full
I
of
don't know.
shit.
I know.
It's not
I
that
don't.
high.
I don't have the number to
See,
hand.
this is why I can't have you on the show. Make up numbers. There's no
I
way.
freely-
you
Not
I
can
freely
have
low
it.
admit
though.
I
It's
have a-
not as
I
low as
have-
you would think.
I have a production PHP 5.6 application running. It's not my
Do
proudest
you?
moment, but it's
Torch
there.
it.
Do what?
Not my proudest moment.
Torch it.
I would love to. I am actively planning on torching it, but
and not calling out anything that any issues, but is there a particular reason you haven't?
It
just
is
going
very much
away?
a client project that the system is so old and antiquated and has so much data on it that it needs to just be pulled off and containerized into.
Gotcha.
And that way it can just continue to live in its PHP little 5-6 life in a very small blast radius instead of a very large blast radius that it's currently running in.
Oh my God, Docker has changed. Has allowed us to say. Good.
We recently upgrading all the PHP servers to the latest Debian, so that we can at least use some new syntax, like that isn't from PHP 5.3 kind of level, because that's what it was. And somebody complained like, our mirror no longer works because you're using PHP 8.2 syntax now, and we haven't upgraded to PHP 7 yet. That's like,
wow.
We axed the mirror program like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
you can't even use mirrors anymore.
How
right?
are they even a mirror?
Well, you can still apparently our
I mean, you
rsync
can
server is still
self-host a
open.
mirror, sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's what they were doing for the company.
Well,
Really?
Like, how do we know this? It's like, sorry.
Well, yeah,
That's
really.
awesome. Just in 100 years, the internet's going to be dead, but there's going to be a PHP mirror out there for 5.6.
And it'll also be
Running
running
on
WordPress.
Yeah.
So stats. As you may recall at PHP Tech, which was just a couple of weeks ago, I ran a little game show one of those nights, and one of the questions had to do with distributions of PHP versions. So I do have the data, and as of PHP Tech, again 2 weeks ago, and according to W3 Techs, 25.9% of sites are running PHP 5 or earlier.
Ooh,
What?
that is
Now,
scary high.
The qualifier on this is that they are only showing the data for sites whose language they know. And this basically means that you are running with exposed PHP enabled. So there's probably quite a few sites out there that have exposed PHP disabled, because that's been a recommended setting for some time. So take that with a massive boulder of salt.
Mm-hmm.
But lies, damn lies, and statistics, a quarter of sites are running PHP 5 or earlier.
That's still pretty high, yeah.
I learned this week, that salt is the only thing that people eat that wasn't alive.
What?
What about water?
You don't.
You don't eat water though, yeah.
You ingest
drink
it. Is the process of drinking so much different from eating? Honestly,
Yeah.
It goes.
Wait,
through the same hole,
I missed
same
that
spot.
statement. What do you mean? Salt is the only thing you
Thing
eat
that
that
we
wasn't
eat
alive?
that wasn't alive. Yeah.
That was never alive. Is what
That
it
was never alive. Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't all spices kind of fall under that?
Salt plants.
Well,
Yeah, most spices come from plants.
that's
Ultimately,
true.
Salt is a rock.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't tend to eat rocks.
I mean,
I'm
I
sure
need
you
more
can find an
granite in my
example.
diet.
I eat
So
crayons.
you're messing with me now, man.
No, I'm not.
I stand by my objection that water is something that you eat.
Okay. I'll give you that one. So besides salt and water. Anyway, it's getting late here.
I don't care.
Such a
You
random
join.
fact to pull out.
You're in
Well-
for the whole ride now.
I have this much time left.
You get that much. All right, TJ, you wanted to talk about tracing.
I mean, we can if you'd like to.
I need to understand what it is. Like, what do
Yeah.
you mean by tracing?
So less like application tracing, more about the package. So I'm building a package called Sparkle, which is a Gen AI package for Laravel, and it's really centered around agents. And to kind of identify the problem, an example of a non-agentic workflow would be like, hey agent, like go write me an article on Laravel 11 service provider registration, right? So that's like a very linear, non like agentic workflow. If you wanted to do that in an agentic workflow, what you could do is then break out two agents, one that writes the article and another one that's a critic. This is like the actor critic pattern. So you have the first one, write the article, you have the second one, criticize it, offer feedback, and then you iterate back and forth between the two over a certain number of cycles. I need observability into those cycles and what's happening in what orders, or if I've given an agent access to utilize several different tools, for example, like a Google search tool where it could go off and like process search results. I need visibility into like what tool it's choosing, how it's like, how many tokens it's using, maybe like logging out what the prompt is. So I kind of need to add tracing to all of this to just have some observability and be able to like audit stuff. So I've been just kind of figuring out how to approach this. I didn't want to write my own, and I'd love something that like came with some batteries for things like it works automatically with Datadog or Jaeger or some other set of tools, just because it's a standard. So I've been taking a look at open telemetry. I haven't worked on the POC yet, but I've just kind of decided on like going down that route, at least is like a first go before writing my own. But I just kind of wanted to like open it up to the group, talking about like tracing, maybe like open standards. I know kind of when I brought that up, Joe had also mentioned with like open telemetry as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a unique use case. I think a lot of times when you think about like tracing, you're thinking about like holistically as an application, but I think this is similar, but little bit tangential to application tracing. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of wanted to open that up to the group, see what people thought.
Part of what got me interested in open telemetry was the fact that it's I was at KubeCon North America last year, and it was a big part of KubeCon that year. It was they had their SIG groups there doing a lot of announcements. They had just reached several milestones. They had just incorporated log functionality to where if your application or your system's adopted open telemetry, you could just like throw your logs onto your open telemetry agent and it would just work. You could throw all your metrics down this agent, and it's just kind of this open source, open standard way of doing telemetry in your application. And telemetry in this aspect is a little bit is actually different than tracing, because tracing would be more about what is the application doing. Telemetry is more about what is happening, not less about what the application is doing and more what is happening. I would liken this a little bit towards event sourcing, to where open telemetry would be like, it would be a breakdown of your event sourcing, like this happened and then this happened and this happened. But open telemetry is essentially a way to connect your application in an open way to handle logging, some event tracing and metrics. And it's a standardized way of doing all that. And it is where a lot of the Cloud Native Foundation is moving a lot of their telemetry products to this setup.
Yeah, that's awesome. That may be the route to look into. I like that this, like, I haven't looked too far into like the open tracing standard, but I do like that this also can leverage not just tracing, but metrics and logging too, because I think there's like two pieces to it. Like, I want to trace the request and be able to see, like, maybe if like in an actor critic scenario, like how many iterations I want to see, like how those requests all went, how long those requests went, how many tokens they used. So I think like this plays well into like, I can get the tracing, but then also be able to provide metrics. And the nice thing about being on an open standard is then I can write adapters. So I can write like an eloquent adapter. I could write, something to like, output to your logs so that you can kind of choose at the end where this stuff goes to, but internally be able to just like work with this single standard.
Yeah, and all of this plugs directly into Datadog. It plugs directly into Splunk and Prometheus, Grafana. If all of these tools that your organizations are already using, hopefully you're already using these tools. It plugs right into it, and that also gives you the freedom and allows you to escape some vendor lock-in, because some applications are very much locked in, and you're just going to use that application. And some of them on the cloud offerings can be very expensive, especially if you're collecting a lot of logs, and those logs have to be stored or indexed somewhere. If you don't have the infrastructure to do that, you're paying somebody in the cloud to do it. It's really expensive. Open telemetry is a path I see towards reducing a company's dependence on those kinds of tools if you're in the industry or the market to where you can build that tooling yourself, whether that's customize your own elk stack for Elasticsearch, Kibana, and Logstash to be able to manage that yourself, or you're just going to build your own observation platform, but it's going to be built on top of OpenTelemetry.
And I think we saw a ton of success with that with like Terraform, right? It's a very similar, like a project in a very similar vein where it's build with Terraform, take it to any provider. It's build it once, take it anywhere. I'm gonna have to dig into that and check it out.
Yeah, the open tracing is interesting to me because my day job is mostly machine learning. So distributed tracing is a thing we should definitely be doing that we don't, because we've essentially modernized a homegrown machine learning framework into a modern DAG system. So going from that, we just had that distributed tracing just isn't something we're there yet, but it's good to know that thing is there, probably right next to OpenTelemetry, and it's probably going to work very similar. So yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Cool. Yeah, and there's like existing tools out there for visualizing this stuff. Out of the Python ecosystem, there's the LangChain framework, and with that, they have LangFlow, which is their kind of like backend for visualizing all of their traces. And I thought it would be cool to be able to, do something on an open standard inside the Sparkle package, and then maybe be able to leverage like that LangFlow tool by building an adapter too. Very cool.
How does that tie into some of the other telemetry or APM extensions that already exist? Do they combine together? I used to work on one for a while where they were also adding OpenTelemetry in it because it's open and nice and everybody can talk to it, but it didn't really have a PHP API on top of that. So from a PHP application, you wouldn't really be able to tie into their OpenTelemetry framework to do the distributed tracing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you can, like, I'm definitely taking the approach where I'm manually building up all of my like trace and spans and everything as different parts of the application. And I know Datadog, they have a whole PHP library that hooks into the internals of PHP. And I think that's really cool. Definitely more than I need, but that was a pretty cool deep dive, taking a look at how Datadog's engine is doing their tracing and gathering all of that and sending it off to their like aggregation agent.
If you've never done any of this, or if you've just kind of glanced at a Datadog dashboard, or you've used their logs product, Datadog is like the gold standard in doing this really, really well. I've been a longtime customer of theirs for the day job, and what they do is black magic sometimes with how fast that they are consuming and indexing events and then filtering events. It's huge.
And I think there's some of the predictive in AI, like, go for it.
I mean, on the PHP extension side, it isn't black magic because it's open source. You can read the code.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
From the developer who doesn't read the internals.
It's just C code. No bother.
See, Ben's got me all excited after at his talk at Tech. That's he brought up specifically like missing things like NumPy and PHP, and I've got a growing interest in bringing some of those ML and AI like tools over to PHP.
There's a blocker before NumPy. Before we get NumPy in PHP, we're gonna have to have pandas, and there's gonna be a war on PHP pandas, and I'm here for it.
So but it doesn't have to be immediately in the core, right? I mean, you can start it out as an extension.
Oh, this could totally be userland. A good bit of it could be userland.
In that case,
an extension.
Yep. Yeah. So I was pretty excited to be at Tech and get inspired about that. And then, Derek, didn't you give a talk on building an extension as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
that was your workshop, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's also a series of videos on the internet that you can watch on my YouTube. And
I live streamed his workshop because the audio kept cutting out. Well, I live streamed a portion of it. Right? Okay. Remember at the beginning, your audio cutting out?
But it's all been there in a nicely edited series of videos that I'm going to continue extending on.
So how about this?
You get a DMCA in the morning from Zarek for taking down her live stream. Sorry, I said Sarah's going to get a DMCA from Derek for taking down her bootleg live stream.
Derek, she'll get one from me. I'm like, hey, that was my conference.
Well, I didn't
videoed
record.
it.
Nothing was recorded. I just like, and I think Eric Mann was the only person who actually connected to it. It was just the one person in the stream who wanted to catch it.
I did
don't
it
know.
separately from the conference beforehand. So
Yeah.
I think it speaks to tech. You know, I went there, I got inspired to contribute back to PHP, and then also at the same conference,
Yeah,
a
you'll love to
workshop
hear
on
that.
how to actually do it. That was really cool. So I'm excited to, dive into some of that too.
So speaking of NumPy, I went and I looked it up afterwards because you're like, hey, this is something PHP needs to be taken seriously for math and science and stuff like that. I couldn't for the life of me figure out the API that they were even presenting. Like, I think it's the docs. I think it's the way their docs are presented. I'm just like, I would love to match your API. What is it?
And I'll be honest, getting into it is so far over my head. I am not a mathematician. I don't know.
Well, the math I can make sense of, but like,
yeah,
I don't know. It's just like if somebody wants to do a userland version of NumPy, I will happily translate that to C code. So go write the userland version.
There you go.
There we go.
Gauntlet thrown
there
down.
It is. Yeah, when I circle back to adding retrieval augmented generation into Sparkle, like that I started building like retrieval augmented generation, which is like RAG, into it's just like a LLM workflow into Sparkle. And as I started diving deeper into it, I'm like, ooh, there are a whole bunch of tools that I am just missing to make this run the way that it needs to run. Okay, we're going to have to take a step back and backfill those before we can move forward. So
yeah.
That's cool. I'll take you up on that for sure.
Sure, yeah.
Well, again, last night on Ugly, John brought up the RFC for support object types in BC Math.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I have never used BC Math. I don't ever know when I would use BC Math. But yeah, it seems like that should be.
Well, that's something that would help something like NumPy, for example.
Yeah. Well, that's what made me think about it. It's like they're talking about NumPy. It's like or NumPy, and it's like, hey, yeah, we have BC Math. Like, how's that different? In can we just expand on that?
Well, I think GMP is actually better, but that's a different argument we could hold.
Okay.
The thing with BC Math, at least the way we use it, but I think from what I recall, like its actual underlying APIs are this way as well, is they treat all numbers as strings rather than arbitrary chains of either BCDs or like real numbers. And that just feels so inefficient to me to constantly be serializing and deserializing between strings all the time.
Just to do that even though just calculations or just on the interface level?
I seem to recall, and it's been a while since I've looked at it, but I seem to recall that like the C-level APIs are also expecting string numbers.
Okay.
So whatever it does internally, maybe internally it's got what are they called? They're not called strings or threads or strands. There's a term for a portion of a very large number. They may use those internally, but by the time it reaches C userland, it's already a string. So we can't present it other than a string to PHP userland. But GMP exposes the proper types. And it's got types for floating points.
I mean,
and quotes.
But even the PHP extension for GMP doesn't expose any of that.
No, it doesn't. It should.
Not a lot of that, yeah.
If you check one of my repos somewhere, there's one called Gimpy, GMPI, and it exposes floating point, integer, quotient, and basically all the APIs I could find in the GMP library.
I mean, this is the argument, right? How do you get arbitrary precision numbers into PHP? I mean, there's so many different ways how you can do that. You can do it the GMP or BC Math way, which are both different. You can have it as a native type, which is a bit of a pain in the bum because you have to do basically everything.
And everywhere
in PHP.
You're parsing numbers, you have to
that is hard to do. Or you allow for like overloaded object in some way and allow that in userland, which makes these things a lot easier.
This is fascinating.
But I didn't say this out loud.
Overloaded objects? What are those?
You didn't hear that from me.
Well, okay. So is a big num plus a big num a new big num, or have you modified the original big num?
Well, there's that too, right? If it's mutable or not.
Yeah,
That's the
basically
biggest.
mutability. Yeah.
It's the biggest mistake I made with the original data.
I was going to say you don't have any experience with that in dates times, do you? Yeah.
No. So talking about that, actually looking at getting a better API for that, better designed. Whether that is user-led or not, I don't know yet. But I
Time
think
for daytime
No, we just put things in the namespace,
Yes.
and this is no longer a problem. And yes, see where we can do something with that. So there are some ideas, because like PHP's datetime is basically does everything all right-ish, but it's not a particularly good API. And there's many different concepts, like you have a moment in time, or you have a calendar date and time, which are not necessarily the same thing.
Well, I think that's why you see projects like Carbon being so popular too.
But Carbon has its issues.
Oh, it absolutely does. I've been bit by it a few times.
For that kind of things, like the low-level stuff in PHP is okay, but is not great, and it could be better. Which then would also benefit things like Carbon on top of that.
This is going to seem like super inside baseball here, but I was working with the MongoDB PHP driver recently.
I've heard of it.
And I noticed that it doesn't accept PHP's date times. It has its own type called UTC datetime.
Yeah, that's
and
because
I want to know, why do you let that happen?
Oh, no. Because that's the MongoDB data type. It's the ISO date.
Yeah, but didn't you, I imagine you were involved in the writing of that library.
I was. And we do, from what I remember, there are some APIs that can convert between them quite well. And I'm also pretty sure that if you set up like the data type mapping through the type maps, it can also do this.
But what would have stopped that from just being datetime?
Because it's not the same concept. A UTC, an ISO datetime is a Unix epoch datetime only without time zone. And the PHP equivalent wouldn't be the same thing. Because PHP doesn't have that time, which is exactly what I was trying to talk about. You have to have this instant, this moment in time. They were not easily translatable.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But
we looked at this really hard to see what the best way we could do, and there wasn't a good way to represent these data types correctly in PHP. And not lose data either way.
Okay. Because if you have one type that ignores time zones and one that knows this time zone and that time zone is not UTC,
then you lose data. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fine. Withdrawn.
So yes, we did think about it quite hard when we actually wrote.
Well, I would have expected you to think about it, which is why I was surprised. I was surprised and shocked. And I said,
but I'm pretty sure there's a ticket somewhere, which I don't have access to anymore.
I'm sure Jeremy can find that ticket for us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I've kept you guys on for over an hour now.
It's already Saturday here.
It's already Saturday there. I'm looking forward to Saturday. Got a good amount of people watching. 40 people watching us live right now. So I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us. I appreciate that. Parting words. Anybody have any parting words? Anybody want to say anything before we wrap this up?
Update your packages.
God damn it, you stole mine. Exactly what I was going to say. And update your PHP as well.
Update your
and
PHP.
Check out PHP Foundation at php.foundation or the php.foundation. Yeah. And
I'm not going to plug anything.
You're not going to plug anything?
No.
TJ? Sparkle?
Yeah. I don't know. I'll have some more updates next time around. But I will say, keep your stuff up to date. Automate that stuff. Automate it. It's easy to automate almost all of it.
match files.
The only thing I can do is show off my elephants.
The elephants. Oh, you got Oscar up there yet? Where's Oscar?
Oscar is sitting in the living room looking at the snooker with us.
Okay. All right.
He's watching TV with us.
Well,
This is a photo behind me. It has not been updated for Oscar.
you need to update Oscar over there as
Well,
well. I
that's
actually have to get Oscar an Oscar because, I need to get Oscar an Oscar.
He didn't even come to
Oscar
his own
should absolutely
conference.
have an Oscar. Yes.
I'm not hurt by that or anything, Joe. Don't worry about it. It hasn't been this thing I've been mulling over for the last couple of
Right?
weeks. No, I've totally let that go.
Right? Sounds like you're totally over it.
I want to thank everybody on the panel, for joining us, especially Derek just popping in last minute, as well as everybody being a part of PHP Tech. You guys are actually what make it a great conference. As much as I was just talking to John about it because we're kind of we've already got the wheels in motion for next year. We're talking to the venue and trying to get contracts signed and stuff. And I was telling John, I'm like, damn, like, had we had this conversation literally like the weeks leading up to Tech, I would have been like, we have got to pause for a month. We've got to get we've got to review how much this is costing us. Is it worth the time and effort? And then not like a couple of days after, it's like, all right, let's just talk about doing it next year because we know we are. And it's because it really has, like, once it gets past everything that we have to do leading to it, and it's the people like TJ, Joe, Sarah, Derek, who show up, who do the talks, who even don't do the talks, who are just there doing hallway conversations and stuff. Once you're in there, like, it's such a moving experience. It always has been for me. I mean, even before I was the one doing the conference, it's like I so much enjoy that whole thing. So thank you all for that, for being part of the community for as long as you guys have been part of this community and contributing to it. Thanks. This is it, right? We're going to next month, second Friday of June at 3 p.m. Pacific Coast time here in the U.S.
If not, certainly at least by 2025.
Yeah, we're not doing a whole nother year before we have our next PHP Roundtable. I like how this went. If you want to be part of the Roundtable, this is not a closed club.
Look how quickly we opened up the Pac-Man for Derek.
Really? Exactly. If you want to be part of the Roundtable, if you have topics you want to talk about, or if you just want to be part of the conversation, hit me up on Discord, hit me up on Twitter. We'll have you in. It's a thing. So,
I was trying to get out the PHP Roundtable elephant, but I'm afraid if I do, all of them will come down. So I will leave it up right now.
I don't have Roundtable, but I got a big Archie.
I should have mine. Yeah. All right, that's it. Thanks everybody. Stream is ending, so peace out.